Call to order the Monroe Public Schools Board of Education meeting. Today is March 11th, 2025. The time is 7 p.m. Jessica, can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Heck,
Here?
Mr. Jenkins.
Here.
Mrs. Myers,
Here.
Mrs. Tarasi. Here. Mrs. Vincent,
Here.
Mrs. Williams. Here. Mr. Zimmerman.
Can we please stand for the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, to nobody out there, but if you wish to address the board during public commentary, please make sure to fill out the public commentary forms located on the table by the door. And please put down at least a brief description of what you're going to talk about for our administrative assistant and turn it into our administrative assistant, Jessica. Okay. Superintendent Shaw, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda this evening?
Good evening. Yes, we do. We are going to be adding new business B3I, which is a superintendent contract renewal date revision.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda with the addition of 3BI,
3I, yep.
3I, the superintendent contract, and approve everything else as written.
Do we have? Do we have support? Support. Can we have roll call, Jessica? Okay.
Mr. Jenkins,
Here, yes. So it got me confused. I can't write and talk at the same time.
Mrs. Myers,
Yes.
Mrs. Tarasi. Yes. Mrs. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams. Yes. Mr. Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes. And the motion passes 7-0. Superintendent comments.
All right, so my first round of comments, so this meeting, we do not have any students. They'll be back at our next meeting, is a quick update on the redesign. As you are aware, we have made the appointments for the administrators. On Monday, yesterday, all of the teachers at the elementary level were giving their notification of the buildings that they'll be teaching in. The next step that they'll do is they'll work with their building level principal to determine the grade level that they'll be teaching. But they were all giving their notifications yesterday. And so now we had about an hour and a half meeting yesterday, continuing to work on the next phase, which is the intra-district school of choice, district lines for our buildings. And then, and so our goal is to have that out next week, along with the start and end times for those buildings. And so that's where we're at right now. Then over spring break, we'll begin laying out that next phase of all these next part of the projects. I know that you'll be seeing in board briefs very soon, it won't be this week, but most likely maybe next, is then the timeline of all the rest of the events. And now that we have the staff named and to the buildings, now we start putting names to classrooms and all that. That's where Dave and his team's work really starts to get going here. He just needs some the spring break here to really pull it all together. So it'll all be laid out. So you'll see the timelines of the cleaning of the buildings to the movement of the buildings to the PD to the all the items that are needed. And as we said there, but we are right on track though to keep everyone informed on those three big tasks right here at the very beginning.
Question, I know there was some concerns about teacher retention. What's the status of that?
So we did not, we've not had anyone call us say, I'm resigning due to this. Do we have some teachers that are bummed by where they're being placed right now? Yes, but the one thing we want to remind all of our teachers and our board is this is the middle of March. April 1st is the date that we've marked for employees and as part of the contract to have notification to us for retirements. It doesn't stop them from retiring further, but what will happen though is over the next couple of months, there will be more movement that will happen, either through retirements and or resignation or it could be some other mechanism. So we remind everybody is that at this moment you might be assigned here, but you may have a different opportunity later on. at the same moment in time too, when these buildings start meeting, for example, the 5-6 building and Waterloo, and they're coming together and building that team, teachers may actually begin to realize too, this is where I want to be. And so it can go both ways. Now, at the end of the day, do we know like how many teachers are going to, for example, leave Monroe Public? We don't know that number. Are we prepping though, make sure we do have a full staff next year? Of course we are. Yesterday, Michigan State, yay, had their day for their students in recruiting. So we had people up there, and now we have BG, Erie, Eastern, and West UT coming up too for us.
My niece was going to interview at Michigan State.
Oh,
So
yeah?
I'll have to give her a call, see how it went.
Yeah. So I know we had some candidates up there that looked good.
This, I know at the last meeting, we talked about that chart, and where we're at with the updates on that and any costs that have incurred.
There's been
Is
no
that
cost
part
at
of
point.
this, like where we're at on this? I thought we were gonna get an update on the.
Yes, and that's why I said there's no cost yet. And
Okay.
so you will have,
How about the timeline?
now I just mentioned a moment ago that will be with you to you next week. as far
Oh,
as
okay, that's
that
what you're talking about.
Very
that.
scaled out.
Okay,
So you're actually gonna end up seeing 2 documents from us because we want to make it really clear. So you have a spreadsheet that will put on there, that'll have the budget, and it'll show on there. So for example, when Terry works with an administrator and they schedule, for example, 2 hours of professional development for X number of teachers, then you'll see that on that document. So that'll be a running document there. Dave, the exact same thing. When it comes to any of the projects and things get bought or done, it'll be placed right on there, but you'll see a list of what we expect to see happening, okay? And then the next line over will be, did it happen or not,
okay,
okay?
thank you.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Shaw. Do we have any public commentary? Okay. Next would be the contracted services report and resignations report, which is included in your package. Are there any questions or any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that the board members would like to have moved off the consent agenda and moved over to new business? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve items B2A to B2C as a consent agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda item 2A through B2C.
Do we have support?
Support.
Jessica, can we have roll call?
Mrs. Myers?
Yes,
Mrs. Tarasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent? Yes. Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Heck?
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Superintendent Shaw.
All right.
Consent agenda.
For our new business items right here, our first item up is the first reading of board policies. And so tonight is a first reading of these policies. These policies will not come back to the board until our April board meeting. And so to our community members that are sitting out there, you do have our packet online. So if you look at it, you'll see the changes in these board policies that I will be going over by title only. And so over this period of time, if you have questions on it, this is your time to talk to a board member and or an administrator on those. But for a first reading tonight will be policy 0152 officers, policy 1130 conflict of interest. This is a new policy. Policy 2510 adoption of textbooks, revision. Policy 3110 conflicts of interest, revision. Policy 3120.08 employment of personnel for co-curricular and extracurricular activities, revision. Policy 4110 conflict of interest, revision. 5340 student accidents, revision. 5500 student conducts, revision. 6110 grant funds, a revision. 6111 internal controls, revision. 6112 cash management of grants, revision. 6114 spending federal funds, revision. 6325 federal grants and funds is a revision. 6550 travel payment and reimbursement, revision. Policy 7310 disposition of surplus property, revision. Policy 7540.09 artificial intelligence, AI, new policy. Policy 7450 property inventory, revision. 8321, criminal justice information security, non-criminal justice agency revision, and policy 9130, public complaints, a revision.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept the policies as listed by Superintendent Shaw as a first reading?
I'll make a motion for the first reading of the board policies as presented.
We have support?
Or
Jessica, can we have roll call?
Oh, one
Oh,
comment.
discussion, excuse
Yeah.
me.
On the policies, I noticed today, and I might have missed it, we talked about keeping the timeline to make sure we know when things were done and how many revisions. I didn't see that on there. Am I missing it? I thought it was going to be more clear than that.
Yep.
You're not missing it, but we can't until, for example, if I put that on there tonight, and say, for example, you pull the policy, and that would have to go for a first reading in April, then it might not get approved till May.
Okay.
So when it's the final submission, when you finally approve it, that will go on there at that time.
So we're not pulling any past revisions or any past, we're only doing from this part forward. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Any further discussion? If not, can we have roll call?
Mrs. Tracy,
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Myers,
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0. Next is the second reading and adoption of the board policy.
Yep. So a second, for a second reading and for our public, when it comes to a second reading, should the board adopt that, that becomes a final, and that policy now and its changes are then made made effective. So it is a recommendation that policy 7440.03, unmanned aircraft systems be accepted as a second reading.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the policy change as presented?
I'll make a motion that we accept the policy for the small unmanned aircraft system.
Do we have support?
Support.
Any discussion? Hearing none, can we have roll call, Jessica?
Mrs. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams. Yes. Mr. Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mrs. Myers,
Yes.
Mrs. Tarasi,
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0.
All right, so our next item is the ATI contract. And so it is a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the contract with ATI Holdings LLC and Monroe Public Schools effective August 1st, 2025.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the ATI contract as presented.
Do we have support? Support. Discussion?
We received the contract, we received the changes, and then we received the highlighted changes. As I was looking at it today, I noticed that the coverage section was not highlighted, but it looks nothing like the original contract. And so I'm not sure what changes are made there and what they consist of.
Yep. So when we presented the contract to you that night, we'd shared, and I apologize for not highlighting it at all, is that it clearly, they reformatted it to call out that the high school is at 40 hours per week and the middle school is 20 hours a week. But then they made it so that the fall, winter, and spring sessions, it shows that all home events are covered. And that was the key that we wanted to make sure that all home events were being covered, except for they put in their example, bowling and golf. And that was when Chad and I were meeting with them, we wanted to make sure that that they knew that all home events at the middle school and high school level had coverage at it. And so that was that format. Is what they changed the format instead of calling it fall, winter, spring, as you saw in the old one. That was the only adjustment there, is really calling it out more clearly.
I believe in the other contract, there was more language beyond home games. And again, it was not highlighted, so I just caught it today. And I just want to make sure before we approve the contract, we know all the changes that were made. And I went to go look for the old one and
Yeah, I don't have it right here in front of me.
Yeah, because there were things, if I recall right, there were things mentioned about state and
Yeah, so they
qualifying
still-
stuff
yeah,
and all
they
that.
still go with the so MHSA sponsored after the season. So, for example, last Friday night, our girls were in the district championship at Woodhaven, and so our trainer was expected to be at that event. She was there, and so and so it's still going to all of the postseason events that we have, except
That-
for again golfing or.
And those are non-home games or
Yes.
only, so where does that, it says
It says it right
on-site
there.
coverage will be available before
Contests.
and during home athletic contests for all sports suspension. It just says home. Kind of clarify me where it says more than home. The other one laid it out. And
Yes.
it was specific even to sports or something, but I'm not catching that in this language.
Travel coverage, sorry.
I mean, if it's gonna cover others, I'd like the contract to indicate that.
Travel coverage will be only for varsity regular season football games. So right there in your second paragraph, travel and coverage will only be for varsity regular season football. So they do take and go to our away games for football games and any team sport that qualifies for the MHSA postseason upon the request of Monroe Public Schools Director of Athletics. So based on the team that's going to be in a competition that night, the athletic director will determine, do they send the trainer, and this is for postseason competition. So, for example, like I said, we had we're away for our districts for basketball, so the trainer was expected to go. So he sent the trainer for that. So it still calls out for all of our home events, and then he does have the right to even, they're going to travel for all of our football games, but if he knows that he needs to have a trainer at a particular event, because there's some schools that may not have a trainer, he can then also send our trainer. But for when it comes to postseason events, he will talk to the trainer, say, we want coverage for that. So when we look at, like for away soccer, if they're, that'd be one of those events where they would be at, because it's a postseason event where there's potential for injury.
Right, so in the old contract, it covered those events in the contract, and that was part of the coverage. So my question becomes, is that an unlimited amount that Chet can send them to, or is it just a
Hopefully we
specific?
get to the state championship in every sport.
Right, but,
season.
I just want to make sure, because the contract doesn't say that. So what happens if we exceed, and I'm like you.
Yeah.
Let's hope every team goes to regionals, goes to states, goes to districts. If that's the case, what is going to happen with the cost? I mean, within
So-
this contract, because it's not listed. I'm just looking at contract language,
Yep.
that's all.
Get into it right here quick.
And I wish that we would have had that.
So I have the old contract in front of me.
Okay, good.
So for coverage, athletic training room and game coverage is based off of 40 hours per week during fall, winter, and spring seasons. If additional athletic trainers are needed or coverage outside the hourly parameter, the hourly rate listed below will be invoiced. Traveling coverage will only be for varsity football games and all MHSAA playoff games until mutually agreed upon between the school and the contractor. Fall, coverage for all levels at all home contests within the hours listed above for all the following sports: football, boys, girls, cross country, boys soccer, girls volleyball, tennis, cheerleading, and tournaments hosted by the school. Injury evaluations will be available for sports participating in games and practices at off-site venues. Winter, coverage for all levels at all home contests with the hours listed above for the following sports: basketball, wrestling, competitive cheer, ice hockey, and tournaments hosted by the school. Injury evaluations will be available for sports participating in games and practices at offsite venues. Spring, coverage for all levels at home contests within the hours listed above for the following sports: baseball, softball, track and field, soccer, tennis, and MHSAA tournaments hosted by the school. Injury evaluations will be available for sports participating in games and practices at offsite venues. Summer, athletic training room and camp coverage can be requested and will be invoiced at $60 an hour. And any additional coverage hours needed or any additional athletic trainers needed can be requested. If coverage is provided a fee of $60 an hour will be invoiced. That's the whole coverage section.
So when we shrunk it down because of the potential, if we can add a sport, it's part of, it's covered. We don't have it, well, we're not gonna have a trainer due to them not being on the list. So it's any fall, winter, or spring sport. Your question in regards to when we go to if it's outside that 40 hours, even if we're hosting a district, they could potentially put in for compensation. I don't know if, Cassie, have you seen anything above the contract? Maybe mileage, is it, or do you ever see anything?
I have not seen any additional extra invoices in, I couldn't tell you how many years. It's been several years. There was a period of time where we did receive some additional invoices, but that was several contracts ago. I can't recall in at least the last 2 school years, any invoicing for extra items.
Okay.
Which I would say it's because a contract covered all of the information that we did, and now it just seems so ambiguous.
No, but it does cover all. So when we changed it, it says your fall sports, so all fall home games and football, tour, a home and or away, and that's for all sports.
Might I add a suggestion?
Yeah.
When did you think of this, when you read this contract?
So when we got the ATI contract, I read it, and I couldn't find all the changes. So I sent an email to Andy and Tom, and I said, could you highlight the changes? Because I'm, spending there trying to figure it out. So Andy said, yes, send us all the highlighted changes. I reviewed the highlighted changes. Today, when I was preparing for the meeting, I pulled out the contract just to review that I caught everything and I didn't have any questions, and I saw the coverage section. And I don't know if that was the page that was missing originally, because one page was missing. And I looked at it and I went, oh, well, that's like half of what it was.
My point that I was gonna make is, you can call Andy,
I spoke to Tom.
okay,
I spoke to him prior to the meeting
You can
and
call
let him
Andy
know.
direct, and we could have had this probably answered for you before we got here.
So this is a public, we're meeting in
is.
the public.
It is.
And so I am sitting here saying, I believe that a contract that we're getting ready to sign
Mm-hmm.
needs to be clarified on contract language changes. Now, you can agree or disagree with me, but I'm pointing
Oh,
out the
no,
changes.
no, there's no problem with that. It's just, we could have, you could have had your questions answered before we got here, is all I'm trying to point out.
So let's let Andy finish up.
So when we met on this part, it was, when we made it more clear, was just that instead of naming the sports, because the expectation in the contract says you will be at all home events, doesn't matter if it's JV, middle school, high freshman, all home events, you're gonna travel to football. And so instead of listing each sport out, we said, no, we'll just list in here that all home events, fall, winter, spring, that's what you're gonna do. When it comes to MHSAA tournaments, and just like we've been doing, it says it right there, is that you'll be at those tournaments that the athletic director wants you at. And the athletic director will, most of the time, will always send the athletic trainer to an event, or when we host, she is the primary trainer too, or he, based on who will be with us that night. So when we host those tournaments too. So it didn't become smaller. All we did is we didn't list out every sport. That's the only change. What we actually pulled in here though too is in this one, making sure that we stipulated the 40 hours of coverage at the high school level and the 20 hours at the middle school cover there. And so, and yes, the formatting changed at the top too, because I struggled with that here about 2 weeks ago when we were talking about it and caught that. So that encompasses the exact same language, we just pulled out the sports.
I like the fact that if you call out the specific sports, if you add a sport, now you gotta change the contract. If we add lacrosse, it's automatically covered.
But that's why what we really wanted to make sure is that we had coverage at all home events.
Right.
7th to 12th grade.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have any limiting language in there.
And I just want to make sure we're not going to incur costs, where Cassie indicated we have not incurred costs in the past. And so I don't want a contract to go forward, all of a sudden we're incurring costs because we changed some language that we weren't aware of. So thank you for taking the time to review it and answering the questions.
And that's the other
And Mary, thank you for pulling up the other one.
And also, fellow colleagues on the board, I may have just sent you 2 quick emails. The first one is wrong, and the second one is right. So the first one is a screenshot of not the section you were hoping for, and the second one is the section that you were hoping for. So if you want to review quickly and you have a device in front of you, you can review the previous contracts. I've already forgotten the section that
Coverage.
thank you.
Coverage.
The coverage section, thank you.
It just really helps when they're highlighted.
I know, I'm not
But
sure
thank
why I
you for
missed that
taking the
page.
time. Cassie, please let us know if there was any changes.
Any additional discussion? If not, Jessica, can we have roll call?
Mrs. Williams? Yes. Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Myers?
Yes.
Mrs. Taurasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Heck?
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0. Superintendent Shaw?
At some point, I'll get off this wagon right here. Someone else will do it. All right, so the next item we have is superintendent goals. And so the goals have been brought forward to the Board of Education. I know you've discussed these, and so it is a recommendation that the Board of Education accept the goals that have been written for the 24-25 school year.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the superintendent goals
Do we have
as
sup-
discussed previously.
do we have support? Support. Discussion.
I would just like to make another nod to something I've suggested earlier, that when we go to evaluate Mr. Shaw this coming September, I would recommend that we as a board come up with some goals for him then that are connected to the areas that we see as areas for growth. And then we make those goals what we would normally call like a SMART goal. So they would be measurable in some way. They would be connected to an area of growth that we would be able to, that they're achievable, that they're time bound, other fun things like that. But that would be a space where it would be a really meaningful time to kind of write those goals. And then it would be also directly tethered to those strands within his evaluation tool.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I know that in our last go around with this, there was much discussion. It was a closed session. But yes, I agree that that's a great time to write down some of those notes and ideas and
Yeah.
reflections
Yep, just,
and share them with the person who is most
Yeah.
benefiting that
Yeah.
information.
yeah. I certainly want to stick to a schedule where in August, we review that and come up with goals before we go into the evaluation.
It's fair, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I'm going to concur with all of you. Evaluations, yes, are done behind scenes. The goals were in open record. So I concur. I believe that there's been many attempts made. I don't think we've hit the mark yet. There is 3 dates. One is April, one is May, and one is August. And yes, they are before the timeline, but those are only to identify processes, plans. So I just want to make note of that they're processes and plans.
additional discussion? If not, can we have roll call, Jessica?
Yes. Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Myers?
No.
Mrs. Taurasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Heck?
Yes, and the motion passes 6-1.
All right, so thank you very much. Our next item is section 105 opt-out. And so for our 2 new board members in the Monroe County, we are unique and coming out of 2 other counties that do not have an opt-out resolution for school of choice. Monroe County is fortunate because in the Monroe County program, school boards opt out at this time of year because we are then taking the county-wide school of choice program. What that allows us to do then is rather than having, releasing as many kids that want to go to any school, we're only required to release up to 1% of our population. And so it's really helped to keep control because there's some years that a school could really have a really bad year and all of a sudden you see 200 or 300 students leave. That'd be what, for Monroe Public. You watch 300 students leave at $10,000 a student, that's a $3 million hole before you realize what's even going on. And so at the 1% number, it's a 45 student requirement for us to release each year. In the school choice world, when we look at this too, though, for us, it's kind of interesting because when we go to look at releases, we look at it from the lens of students that were in our program the year prior. All right, there's some kids that are being released that we never saw in our system, but those that are in our system, we actually lose. That number is less than 10 each year, and so it's wonderful to see that. But this opt-out resolution is in place so that we can opt out of the state of Michigan's program for school of choice, and that way we can use the Monroe County one. So it is our recommendation to opt out of the 105 resolution as presented.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we opt out of the 105 resolution, but I think we should wait and see if Stacy comes back so she can vote.
Yeah, we'll give her a minute here. We're on just 105.
Just a 105.
Yeah, we can have, there's 105 and 105C.
Yep.
We have some music, like Jeopardy music, do, do, or I'll be right.
Give her. Let's take a 5-minute recess until Stacy comes back.
All right.
So we're going into recess at 7:31 PM. It's 7:33 and we are back in session. We have a motion and I believe we had support
We do
I
have
don't-
support.
from Carrie.
Support.
Uh,
I don't think we have, do we?
Yeah,
Yes.
Carrie snuck it in. Do we have discussion? Oh,
Sorry about this, guys. You're starting.
oh, I think she's,
All right, go ahead.
okay. Discussion?
Yeah, so, in light of the upcoming changes, in light of, everything, the plan that's coming forward, I thought it would be beneficial for us to read what we're voting on, so that's part of the record, so we can understand that how does this impact that, or doesn't it?
So you're talking about like the redesign, right?
Yeah,
So the impact is very much similar, where the last 2 years, a community member, someone that's in our system that wants to go to some other district, they fill out the school of choice application window between the April 1st and June 28th, right there, yep. And so they fill it out. Then early July, we review the applications, and if we're over 45, we can hold a lottery. Most years, we look at it though from the lens of how many are currently, for example, already in another district, and that we're catching up. Because there are sometimes that happens where students have been in a district or their sibling is in the district. So those are automatic sign-offs. Now, I know in some school districts, they count that against the 45, okay? But again, for our system, we've never seen that child before. So we're not gonna split up families. And so those go off the top, and then the next ones that generally hit us are people that have potentially moved and they've got like a sophomore or junior that's been in another district for a long time, they're automatically. So that's why I said, when we get down to the ones when it's really our kids that we had in our system, that we saw the funding for those students in the years prior, it's less than 10. And in the last 2 years, we've signed off on every single one. So the 45 is the minimum requirement for Monroe Public Schools to sign off on, and it's 1%. And so for ours, though, that number will always go above it, because some of these kids are, like I said, they have family members already, and we're not going to deny that child, that has a family member already in another local, or there's even sometimes that a local would say, okay, Mary, I use an example that you're a teacher in another school district, and so they actually count that, your son going to their other building, as one of their so many. And so I don't do that. We look at it just simply from the lens of that side. So when it comes to like any of the people that may wish to look at leaving us, if it goes over the 45, we'll make that analysis there. But that's been the practice I've taken each of the years here.
oh, so I truly thought that 45 was the cap. I thought that was the
That's-
1% of,
That's your minimum that we are required to release is at minimum.
that's the state minimum.
Yeah, that's Monroe County. So
Monroe
for us,
County.
it's based off of our no, it's spring.
Yeah.
It is spring. It is 1% of your spring count. And so for us, it's 45. Erie Mason's 10. Ida's 17. Jefferson is 13-ish. I'm just guessing on their numbers, by the way.
I'm guessing you're pretty
and-
right on.
But they're pretty close there. So each district has a different number based on what that 1% of their total population is. For our school district, it is the people that are in our building. And when we make sure that we pull out any of because in our district, we do service students in our parochial system, okay? And so we get a small FTE for that, but that number of students does not count against us. Otherwise, that number would be much larger too.
Right. I just want to make sure we're taking into account, because there's big changes coming. When do the redistricting lines come out? Because that may impact these numbers. So they come out next week, so they'll be able to know. So, and I'm not suggesting this is the case, but if the case became that there were 25 more people than the 45 that wanted to move, that wouldn't be a problem. Because that came up in discussion a lot during these meetings. So I just want to make sure that we've thought
So-
about all the
Yep, so-
community members
so
and
two
what
thing-
they've said.
Yeah, so two things will happen is one, we'll work and advocate for our kids and families not to leave us.
Right,
at
for sure,
all
first
time.
of all, right.
But when we really think to what we've seen the last 2 years, kids in our system at the current year or prior, have been with us, is under 10. So you'd have to really push a big number of students wanting and parents wanting to leave. The other difference in Monroe County, which is fortunate compared to all the rest across the state, is you do not go into somebody else's district. And so in the other two counties I worked in, literally buses in and out passing each other. And when I say in and out, like 10, 15 miles into another district or right to their downtowns. In Monroe County, if your bus goes from, like in Monroe County, or sorry, Monroe's district, we have some areas where we go from Monroe through Ida and back into Monroe. If it's part of your bus route, you are more than welcome to stop, but you cannot change and go in to come back out. So as long as it's part of your route there, you could.
Right.
And so for parents also though, is going to another district, you're transporting too.
Yeah.
And so that is a unique difference where, when it's in other counties, that transportation is a non-variable, but here it
I
is.
think that was made very clear during the discussions of the families. I just want to make sure that we're reiterating exactly what we shared with them during the,
Nope,
the
I'm
big
not-
plan.
I won't be stopping them because the release is there. We'll do all of everything we can to encourage for them to stay. But
Right.
the other part is too, I've always believed, and this is my own philosophical approach, which means you guys can all have a different one, is we're gonna do everything in our power to make Monroe a phenomenal place to live and learn. And so what we wanna do is really make it so people want to stay and or
Right.
attract people in and take care of ourselves. And that's the first and foremost way
Yeah.
I always look at school of choice there. And so when we release some of these students, I'll talk to the parents, I'll say, do you know that your Monroe Public Schools is your home district, will always will be, and so please know that you're warm welcome back here, so.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and that's why about 7 volunteers sit here, for the same reason. I just wanted to clarify that, so it's all, we know for sure. Thank you.
Just curious, Andy, how long has this program been in place for Monroe County?
So they actually, the Wisdom, I believe, is in 1992 or 3 is when School of Choice began in the state of Michigan. And Monroe County Soups at that time had the wisdom and wherewithal to put this into place. And in some years, it could have been a phenomenal win for Monroe Public, okay? But then it could have been other years, it could have been a mass exodus. And that's what we've seen in other districts, and that larger districts that were once very large, Albion, for example, and Albion is not there anymore. And so it can decimate you. So that's why we take care of our own first.
Yeah, but if there's no maximum,
Right.
there's no controls.
Yep, and that's
Yeah.
and that's why Monroe
Right.
County did it, which is beautiful because I mean we could have been bleeding 300-400 kids a year.
And now it's,
45.
I thought 45 was the
That's the max.
minimum.
But what we see though is like but what we have to always think about is how many kids that we saw in our system that we caught had money for last year.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, is 45 the minimum or the max?
That's the minimum number.
The minimum number, so it could be 100, it could be the 300 or 400 you're talking about.
If I was to release them, once we get once you go over that 45, now you could put a lottery system into place. We analyze it from the lenses I shared a moment ago, where this side of the house here, we saw all of their money, which means they were in our system last year, and they all asked to leave. Well, that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000 that just left, okay? Whereas this side of the house right here, you guys were in a parochial system, you were in a charter, you were somewhere else. We never saw you, okay? So I really don't view you as counting as a loss because we never saw your money. This is a loss, straight on our
Right.
budget, okay?
Right.
And so that's why sometimes when we'll go above that, we'll go
Right.
above 45 because we actually see more of it from about Cassie this way
Yeah.
of the releases because there are students that we never saw.
Right.
And have that choice there.
Right, but you understand that that was a big topic of conversation with families, and,
Yeah.
and I just want to
Yep.
make sure that, again, we didn't misspeak or mispresent, and we
Nope.
can meet all needs of whatever people are coming at. All right,
Okay.
works for me.
Any additional discussion? If not, Jessica, can we have roll call?
Mr. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mrs. Myers.
Yes.
Mrs. Tarasi.
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0.
So now the 105C, all that refers to is contiguous counties. So what it allows for us to do is accept students in from Wayne, Lenawee, and Washtenaw counties. So a contiguous county of Monroe, a student can come to us. If we didn't have the 105C agreement on hand, we could accept no students. Do we see a lot of kids? No. But if you don't have it, you have no opportunity either.
What about, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
That's a question.
Oh.
What about cross-border from Toledo?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm thankful that we are this far north. In my prior district, that was a big, major headache.
Yeah, because you were 10, 15 minutes.
Well, you couldn't, you're not permitted to educate students from outside the state. So, yeah, that was a headache.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we opt in for the section 105C resolution.
Is there support?
Support.
Any more discussion? Jessica, can we have roll call?
Mrs. Myers,
Yes.
Mrs. Tarasi,
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0. Superintendent Shaw, the calendar.
All right, all right, I get to stop. Cindy, you're up to bat, ma'am.
Tonight, we're asking the board to move to approve the Monroe Public Schools calendar for the 2025-2026 school year.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the 2025-2026 school calendar.
Is there support?
Support.
Discussion?
I would like, well, I would appreciate just information about absences on 2-hour late starts, half days. And then I would like for the board to consider weighing that data against the cost of the full day PD days, because from my perspective and my train of thought is there might be some value to spending some money if it means more students are in school getting instruction. So I think that that might be something that might be worthwhile pending what that information, what that data looks like. Just for your consideration in the future. That's all.
So you're not applying that to this contract?
No.
Okay.
Because we don't have that information and we need to have a calendar for next year.
Right. But we are going to get the attendance data.
Yes, we are.
Thank you for that.
Good.
That has nothing to do with this, but thank you for that. It does, but it doesn't. Yeah.
Any additional discussion? If not, Jessica, can we have roll call?
Mrs. Tarasi,
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mrs. Myers,
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0.
All right, E-rate Cisco purchase, Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. We're asking the board to move to approve the purchase of the following Cisco network equipment from People Driven Technologies at a cost not to exceed $70,325.60. This purchase will be funded by the technology millage budget and discounted by the E-rate program.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the E-rate Cisco purchase not to exceed $70,325.60 being pulled out of the technology millage.
Do we have support? Support. Discussion?
Question, technology millage budget.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that? Can you give us some information on that? We don't have to have it tonight, but if we can
That's the
get that.
countywide technology millage. Each student, we get so much per pupil. and
Yeah.
we use it dedicated.
Yeah,
to
if you can give us a rundown on that budget, how it works and whatnot, that'd be great. Only because technology, as we discussed last night, costs are just increasing, so that would be my request.
Any additional discussion?
Let's say mileage or millage,
Millage. Is it?
like mileage.
Oh, it's spelled mileage, it's missing an L.
Should be millage.
It's missing an L.
In the page that has the motion, it says mileage, but on the agenda, it's millage.
Millage.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any additional discussion?
Okay.
Jessica, can we have roll call?
Mrs. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mrs. Myers,
Yes.
Mrs. Tarasi,
Yes.
Mr. Heck.
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0.
And our new item that was added tonight, superintendent contract renewal date revision. The Board of Education and I had a conversation around moving the automatic renewal from April 1st to October 1st to coincide with the evaluation of the superintendent. And what would happen is if the board, through the evaluation process, the superintendent is found to be effective, it'd be an automatic renewal. If it's not anything less than effective, then the board would then take action to make to reduce that, to not renew that next year, so the automatic would be removed away. So the recommendation is just to change my contract from a April 1st automatic renewal for that third year to October the 1st.
And just so, for the audience, this is strictly a timing issue so that it would, as Superintendent Shaw said, that it would correspond with the evaluation, which, in my experience in the business world, is what everybody does, rather than having it disjointed from that evaluation. Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move the automatic renewal date of the superintendent contract from April the 1st to October the 1st.
Do we have support?
I'll support.
Discussion?
I thought this was a one-time date change. This is a permanent change in the calendar. I thought this was a one-time for 1 year.
No, it goes into the contract. Every year it's going to be, the trigger point will be October 1st.
Right.
Okay.
Because every year there's that potential to, extend the contract 1 year.
Yep,
Not
we're
extended.
well, we're not,
Not extended.
we're actually not talking about extending a contract per se because we've already have a ride out of another 2 years. So it's that rider that's, what's it
It's
called
the-
in there?
It's a trigger date.
The
It's a
trigger date, right.
To add,
Yeah.
if we do nothing, if we leave it the way it is on April 1st, if we do nothing, an additional year is added to the contract.
Right.
And that happens every year at April 1st currently. That's why we're moving it to October
Yeah.
1st every year.
I literally thought it was for 1 year because I want to make sure all the other dates match up then. Everything else was written on the June 30th, I believe.
Right,
date.
that's so.
So if we don't have,
Right, so all that this refers to is the extension of a contract, nothing else.
Okay.
So anything that has to do, because
Yeah.
the June 30th is the end of the fiscal year, the new.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Financial
asking,
year
Matt.
begins July 1, so everything else is coincides with that
Yeah.
right.
there.
Yeah.
And so the evaluation that would be done in October would be the reference for that and anything that came up in the meantime. Am I getting that right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Mary gave me a nod for all those.
Yes.
Didn't see that.
Yes, and as Tom was explaining last night too, that we would still have other means to provide
Yeah.
opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
I'll put
Well,
it
I
that
just
way.
mainly wanted to make sure that the contract language mirrored up. That was it.
Yeah.
That was all I was
Yeah.
referring to.
That it will. More discussion? If not, Jessica, can we have a roll call?
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Myers?
Yes.
Mrs. Taurasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Heck?
Yes, and the motion passes 7-0. Old business, do we have any old business for tonight? We do not?
Are we going to start adding old business on the agenda? I know we talked about this before, stuff that is still on our to-do list. And I know we talked about either putting that on before the agenda was printed or,
Yeah.
so is that what the process we're going to follow is?
Yes, if you have old business to add,
Yeah.
certainly.
So
you're
typically,
late.
old business is items that were moved off of something that was a new business item. So it might have been discussion, it goes to old business because it still needs to be action. A lot of the areas that you're talked about, those are getting put into workshops where we can have a lot of time and conversation around it.
So my reference to that comes from a former board member named Mr. Bunkelman, who always kept an old agenda item going. And so I was referencing that as to keeping the topic highlighted, making sure everybody knew.
Yeah, typically, on Robert's rules, if we postpone something from a previous board meeting and we bring it back, you postpone it indefinitely or you postpone it to the next meeting, then that would go into old business.
Yep.
Okay.
So for example, at our next board meeting, the second reading of your policy, that'll be old business because it's not a new business item. It's already been read once, so it'll go into old business. So that's where that will sit. But all the items that you've brought up as an area that you want to have discussed, we've been keeping a list and it's part of our going into these workshops.
Okay.
Okay, superintendent comments.
All right, so the spring play is this week. Radium Girls at Monroe High School. And so it begins this Friday and runs through from March 14th to the 16th. 7 o'clock on Friday and Saturday, and then 2 o'clock on Sunday. Tickets will be sold at the door.
Can I just comment, that's kind of a depressing story.
Radium Girls?
Yeah,
You got to contrast the musical somehow.
that's not a musical, I hope.
No,
Okay,
It's a
thank
play.
God.
contrast it, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
I'm
Okay.
unfamiliar with it, but I think I'm going to remain unfamiliar, right?
It's not a pleasant story.
Oh,
Well, like, death of a salesman, like,
That's,
It's history.
it is history, something to learn from.
It's something there. So the other one is March is Reading Month, as you may all be aware right there. So H Elementary has a lot going on in there in there for the month. Hey, March the 18th, Sodexo. Tom and I have had the pleasure the last 2 years. I think Larry was with us one of these years. So if you'd like to judge or do something with future chefs, March the 18th is a beautiful night. It's a cool program. And even if you don't judge and you want to take part that night, come on out. Our elementary, each building, I believe, is represented with a Sodexo employee, and they make a meal for us, and you get to test it out. And it's hard because you're trying to not eat all of it right at the very beginning, and so, but it's a pretty cool one. Tomorrow night is, Wednesday the 19th is the National Junior High Honor Society. And so, as you all know too, we are on a dead sprint, I know the kids are, to spring break. And as I commented to a person earlier today, because next Friday afternoon, spring break kicks off, and all of this time right now is just like crammed together. And so it's like trying to just make sure we have everything done. And so what we also say to all of our kids and staff, please be careful on spring break this year. And so we come back, and then we're back on another super fast 9-week run roughly to all of the things that are at the end of the school year. And I would say things is get your calendars ready for May, middle of April. Wendy will start putting the calendar together, and you'll get bombarded. And we thought February is a busy month. Wait for May, everyone. So lots and lots will be going on right there. So, but it is nice to see that the weather has shifted a little bit right here as we march towards spring. We'll see if how the Lion and Lamb do in March. Lastly, tomorrow night, for those board members that did sign up, we do have the MCABOE, which is a Monroe County Association of School Boards meeting at the ISD at 6 p.m. Dinner, and then they're doing their presentation that tomorrow night on the science of reading, I believe, is what they're going to be discussing. So it's a really neat night to come and be part with your fellow board members, and then meet other board members from other districts. So 6 o'clock tomorrow night.
Okay,
That's all I have to say, sir.
okay, thank you, Superintendent Shaw. Public commentary.
I don't think there is any tonight.
No? Okay. Then board member commentary. Any board members would like to contribute anything tonight?
I just have two things I want to bring up. One is there's a rental paperwork that we've been getting. Can we get a policy to go with that? I don't know of one. And then the other thing is on positions, that as positions are coming up, and I know you gave us the chart that kind of helps organize that, keeps me organized, asking you less questions, that any of the positions that come up are identified within that cluster, because I believe that was a complete listing, right? The staffing chart you gave us? Okay. So anything new coming up that ensures it falls within the category there, and if it's outside of it, let us know. Because I believe those would all be the fulfilled creative positions. Thank you.
That it?
That's it.
Anybody else with any commentary? I guess it was unfortunate we couldn't get Kurt or Chet to talk a little bit more tonight, but I certainly have a lot of questions,
Yep.
so let's get him scheduled up soon.
Excited to come back.
Okay. If that really concludes our agenda for this evening, the next regular Board of Education meeting will be held Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. We'll begin at 7 p.m. A board work session will be held prior to the board meeting, beginning at 5:30 p.m. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Support?
Support.
Show of hands. Okay, the Monroe Public Schools Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 is adjourned. And the time is 8 PM.